Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are talking about backup offers today. Last week, we talked about multiple offers. And certainly, if we have some time, we can go over any questions that you may have had come up um, from that class of multiple offers. And we'll touch a little bit on it because it does go hand in hand with the backup offers. But basically, what we're discussing is when you have on either side, and I'll start with the seller side, the listing agent side, when you have a listing that receives multiple offers, last week we talked about how to deal with that, how to notify the parties that there are multiple offers, and what form to use. I'm going to show that form again, just so that you can see that one more time. Here it is, the multiple offer disclosure and notification form, okay? So this is what we want to fill out, notifying all parties that there are multiple offers, and you're letting them know when the offers are due, okay? Now, after you have received all of the offers, you are going to, you are going to then be discussing with your seller which offer they feel is best, or the one that they want to work with. So that could mean that they go ahead and accept an offer. It could also mean that they counter one of the offers. However, we need to discuss what happens with the other offers. So for this example, we're just going to use the number 2, that we just got 2 offers to make it a little bit easier. So if we had 2 offers and our sellers decide which one offer they would like to accept or counter, then there's still another offer out there. There's still another buyer that is still interested because they have written an offer. So we may want to offer to them that they stay in line as a backup offer. Now, I will tell you that some buyers, when they hear that they did not win, they will get out of the game altogether. They will move on. They may have had another house that they were looking at, and they're going to move on and write an offer on that one and hope to get that one accepted. Or they might just have hurt feelings and they might move on. But a lot of times, if it is a home that the buyers really, really, really liked, they will want to stay in a backup offer position. Now, as a listing agent, you may get a question from a buyer's agent. That buyer's agent who did not win the offer for their client may ask you, how strong is that offer? Do you think it's going to close? What contingencies are in the offer? And you just need to be very careful what information you give. Now, as you all know, in MLS, when you enter a listing that is under contract, when you change the status, it gives you the opportunity to choose which contingency, if any, there is. So you can give a little information, but you want to be careful. Do not tell them how much the offer is. Don't tell them the other terms of the offer. You may tell them, I will know more after the inspection period, let's say. And you can even give them the date in which you might know more. Being careful not to give too many details, but you can give them a general idea of when you might have a better idea of whether or not the offer is going to work out. Now, if it is a cash offer with no contingencies, you might just say it looks pretty strong, but you never know. I wouldn't go into that it's cash because then you're getting into the terms. However, if there are no contingencies and you're changing the status in MLS, then you would immediately mark it in the pending category because there are no contingencies. So you may give away the information that they need just by the status change in MLS, which that's okay. But just be careful what information you give out. So we're going to talk about the backup offer form. I'm going to share that now. Okay. Backup agreement. You can all see this? Okay. Mm-hmm. Backup agreement contingency addendum. So this is either a number or a letter. Either one is perfectly acceptable. It can be A or it can be 1, okay? This is going to be for the buyer that did not win, okay? And we will say that they want to stay as a backup offer, okay? So their name goes here, the seller's name goes here, the property address goes here. Make this a little bit bigger. This backup agreement contingency addendum, hereinafter addendum, between the undersigned seller and buyer is entered into and is effective as of the binding agreement date provided in the purchase and sale agreement for the purpose of changing, deleting, supplementing, or adding terms to said purchase and sale agreement in consideration of mutual covenants herein and other good and valuable consideration, the receipt and sufficiency of which is hereby acknowledged, the parties agree as follows. Number 1, seller and buyer acknowledge that this agreement is a backup or secondary agreement to the primary agreement with a binding agreement date of blank between seller and primary buyer regarding the above property. So this date is the binding agreement date of the current primary offer, okay? So it's the winner, let's say, of the multiple offer situation, okay? So this is going to be something that more than likely you as a listing agent are going to fill out. If you are the buyer's agent and you're filling this out, then you'll just need to get the binding agreement date from the listing agent, okay? Number 2, this agreement is contingent upon the primary agreement being terminated or becoming null and void. So this agreement does not go into effect, and it is contingent on the primary agreement somehow falling apart, okay? Number 3, upon the closing of the sale provided for in the primary agreement, this agreement shall become null and void. So if the number 2 offer, so the backup offer, continues and nobody terminates, the buyer does not terminate prior to the primary offer closing, then this offer automatically terminates, okay? Because obviously the house has sold and there's nothing to have a backup agreement on. Number 4, buyer acknowledges that seller shall have the right to amend the primary agreement without said amendment having the effect of placing this agreement in a primary position. Okay, so what this means is when you're doing any negotiating whatsoever with that primary contract, it does not mean that this backup agreement would come into first place, okay? You do all of your regular negotiations. So if you decide to give money off of the price instead of doing repairs, let's say, for example, that doesn't make this offer, this backup agreement, take primary position. You do all your normal negotiations. The only time that this primary, or this backup agreement rather, would take the primary agreement's place is if the primary agreement fell through for some reason, okay? Number 5, buyer acknowledges that buyer shall have no right to examine or be advised of the terms of the primary agreement or any amendments thereto. So that's what we discussed in the very beginning. Number 6, in the event that the primary agreement is terminated or becomes null and void, seller or seller's representative shall deliver to buyer or buyer's representative written notice thereof, at which time the contingency provided in this addendum is satisfied, and this agreement shall move into a primary position. All time periods specified in days in this agreement shall commence from the date buyer receives written notice that the primary agreement has been terminated or is null and void. So if the primary agreement falls apart, then the listing agent should notify the buyer's agent, okay? And then making sure, we need to go over this again, all time periods specified in days in this agreement shall commence from the date buyer receives written notice that the primary agreement has been terminated or is null and void. So what that's talking about, this in essence becomes the buying an agreement date, okay? So all time periods specified in days. So what are we talking about? Loan commitments, earnest money delivery, inspection contingency periods, resolution periods, all of those dates that we give days for, those start as of the day that the buyer is notified that they now have the primary agreement, okay? Number 7, this agreement shall remain in effect as follows. So you need to select one of these options. So option A, until blank, at which time buyer shall have the option of either terminating this agreement by delivering written notice thereof to seller, or extending the date set forth in this paragraph by delivering to seller or seller's representative a signed proposed amendment to this agreement, which sets forth a new date through which this agreement shall remain in effect. In the event that seller does not execute said proposed amendment within blank hours of receiving it, then this agreement shall become null and void. Buyer must exercise the option provided in this paragraph by delivering to seller or seller's representative the required notice or proposed amendment by blank time on the date set forth in this paragraph. Or until, and option B is until buyer terminates it by delivering to seller or seller's representative a written notice of termination at any time prior to the time buyer receives from seller written notice that the primary agreement is terminated or has become null and void. So these two options, to make it a little bit easier, there's a lot of words in this first one. Basically, what this is saying is this agreement, this backup agreement, shall remain in effect either until this date, okay, or until it is terminated by the buyer. So there are different reasons why someone might choose to write a date in here. Personally, I think B works well. And Jeff, you can chime in if you have a good reason to do A. I like B because then it puts the buyer in the driver's seat. I guess if you're choosing A, it puts seller more in the driver's seat, a little bit more. B allows the buyer at any time to terminate. So in a backup offer situation, if you as the buyer have this backup offer on this house, 123 Main Street, you're probably going to continue to look at houses. And maybe you find one that you really, really like and you want to write an offer on it. Well, you know better than to write an offer on a home when you have a backup agreement on another one. So that would give you the right at any point in time to terminate this backup agreement, even if you have not had notification from the seller. Jeff, do you have a good reason why you might choose option A and put a date in?
I do not have a good reason at all.
Yeah.
So actually, I would always pick B.
Yeah. As far as a buyer goes, I would always pick B. If you are a listing agent and you're filling this out, you may choose A if this backup offer is not great. And you think that if by chance the first primary offer falls through, you might want to give your seller a little more chance to get a better offer. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't counter this offer and negotiate. But what it does do, I guess, if you choose A, is it gives the backup offer an actual termination date, even prior to the primary falling out. It's probably a little bit of a risk to do that for your seller, but there again, if that second offer is not great, they may not really want this backup offer to become the primary if it falls through. So I guess that could be a reason. I'm with Jeff. I think I'd always choose B. Okay, notices, moving on to number 8. Except as otherwise provided herein, all notices and demands required or permitted hereunder shall be in writing and delivered either 1, in person, 2, by a prepaid overnight delivery service, 3, by facsimile transmission, fax, 4, by the United States Postal Service, postage prepaid, registered or certified return receipt requested, or 5, email. Notice shall be deemed to have been given as of the date and time it is actually received. Receipt of notice by the real estate licensee or their broker assisting a party as a client or customer shall be deemed to be notice to that party for all purposes under this agreement as may be amended unless otherwise provided in writing. This addendum is made part of the purchase and sale agreement as if quoted therein verbatim. Should the terms of this addendum conflict with the terms of the purchase and sale agreement or other documents executed prior to or simultaneous to the execution of this addendum, the terms of this addendum shall control, and the conflicting terms are hereby considered deleted and expressly waived by both buyer and seller and buyer. In all other respects, the purchase and sale agreement shall remain in full force and effect. And then it has where the buyer and seller sign, and then the listing company and the agent's name, and selling company and the agent's name. So these backup agreements have changed a little bit. I actually really like how they have changed. What this does is it basically just puts your buyer in line to be a backup offer, okay? It allows for them to hold on to their earnest money. It used to be that we would take the earnest money, and more often than not, it was just an accounting nightmare. I have had several situations where a backup offer, and I was on the listing side, where a backup offer was given and the primary fell apart and we actually went to the backup offer. I had one situation where I had 2 or 3 of the 12 offers I received on a house in East Nashville that wanted to be backup offers. And we simply had to number them, and they had to be in order of who was next in line, basically. We did end up going, the first deal fell through, and we did end up going with the first backup offer that actually ended up closing. But they can get messy. And this backup agreement contingency addendum, I believe, makes things a lot cleaner. It allows the buyer to feel like they still have a chance. But again, choosing B here also gives the buyer the right to terminate at any time. So what questions do you have on this form, first of all?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I've been driving and listening, so I haven't been able to follow the form, but
It's okay.
so I have a question. So on a backup offer, if you are the buyer's agent and you're the backup offer, if you continue to look at other houses and you find a house,
Mm-hmm.
can you get out of that backup offer?
Yes. So you have not been able to see, but the option A and B that we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yes. If you chose option B, yes, it gives the buyer the right to terminate at any time. So what you would want to do as a buyer's agent before writing an offer on or submitting an offer, I guess, on another house for your buyers, you would want to write a notification that the buyer is terminating this backup agreement on this
Okay.
123 Main Street. And then they can
Okay.
go forward and submit the offer on the next house.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. What else?
Can you hear me, Michelle?
Yeah, hi, Gail.
Hello. So what happens if, you're shopping, they find you're the backup offer, they find a house, they submit an offer, and it's not accepted. Now you're like out for your first house
Mm-hmm.
and the second house that you find as well.
Right. So chances are, if that first 123 Main Street allowed your buyer to have the backup agreement, if there's not another one, they may accept it again. You may be able to go back to them with the same offer you had and still be in line as a backup offer. They also may like the second one better and want to be a backup offer on that one. You just have to be careful, and it's a risk no matter what. It's a risk being a backup offer that, they're sitting there waiting and it never happens and the first one closes and they're out. It's also a risk that they go out and find another house and exactly what you said happens, that they get out of the first backup offer and they don't get the second one and then they're out again. But as what I would tell the buyer is there was no guarantee that you were going to be the primary in that first backup offer. So, we might as well take the chance in getting this other house. And, unfortunately it didn't work out, but we can go back to the first people if you'd like and see, kind of where they are in their contract. And, the listing agent might know more at that point in time. You could always resubmit an offer. And if they decided to resubmit an offer to the first people, and there was some indication that maybe it wasn't strong, that gives you the option to change your offer up a little bit. They may be trying to negotiate repairs and might not have,
Hey, Jeff.
Yes.
may not be working out as well as they had hoped. And so what you might decide to do as an agent representing the buyer in that case, you might tell your people, hey, let's go in just a little bit stronger. Let's rewrite an offer as a backup offer. And if you go in just a little bit stronger and the primary cannot work out an agreement on repairs, then your buyer might get it. So there's all sorts of ways to help a buyer out, even if they have lost the primary role, I guess, primary contract position for a home that they really love. And that also it speaks to what you can do as a backup agreement. If you know that you're the only one that wants to write a backup, you can always go back in and resubmit a stronger offer. You can do an addendum or an amendment to your original offer. So, you have a chance to make the position even better for your buyer. Doesn't mean it will always work out, but you can make those changes. And like I was talking about, if the primary gets a little squirrely for whatever reason, the seller knows that they have this backup that is even stronger now, and they may decide to move to that instead of mess with the first people, because they might just starting to be difficult. Other questions? Who has a situation that they have been in as an agent or a buyer or seller, that you've been in multiple offers? Jeff,
Ever or now?
what's that?
Ever or now?
Ever.
I've had plenty.
Right. So why don't you give us a scenario?
I have never been successful at a backup offer. It seems like usually the primary wins out 99% of the time. We've done a few backups, and really I do backups honestly because they don't tend to work out, but a lot of times I do it to make sure that I hold on to my client. So, you're still working with the client, you've got, that, and then it enables you to really keep them from getting so frustrated that they don't want to back out or stop looking for properties. At least they got a backup on something. And most of the time it'll give them, we'll still go out and look at other stuff. And most of the time, I've put in some backups, and most of the time we withdrew them. And that's why I would always go with that option, because we end up looking at the properties and they do find something. They're like, oh, I'm glad we're back up there because I like this house better anyway.
Right.
So,
right. That just as you were speaking, it made me think during this time, I believe we're going to see more primary contracts fall out. I think this is a great time, if you're representing a buyer, to write those backup agreements, because a lot of people are going under contract sight unseen.
Yep.
I have a listing now that the buyer had not seen it. They are out of state. And they finally saw it this past weekend, and we all kind of breathed a sigh of relief because they liked it. And, we were still in inspection. So they could have, walked away if they didn't like it. So I do think that this is a timely discussion. And if you have buyers that lose out on a multiple offer situation, make sure you talk to them about being a backup, because it, like we talked about, it doesn't hurt anything. Doesn't mean that they can't go out and find another house. Just make sure that you use the notification form if they want to withdraw. It's very, very simple. So I would absolutely say this is a great time to be doing that, as we're going to be seeing more of this come into play, I believe.
I've actually had a closing today with one that I did a FaceTime walkthrough with. My buyer is still in California. He has not seen the property at all, and we're closing today. So.
And it's a primary residence?
No, it's not. It's an investment property.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I've had many investor clients who to this day never seen the property, never stepped foot in it. It's money to them, but we're seeing a lot more primary buyers, primary resident buyers, buying sight unseen right now.
Yeah.
I've got a buyer right now that is looking in a very decent price range that they're going to be doing most of their looking, if not all, virtually. And, as a buyer's agent, that scares you a little bit. You want to make sure that you show everything so that They
We
don't
have a form for that, right? We have a form for the buyers to sign
for
that they've taken this property. They're writing this offer and accepting this offer sight unseen.
no,
We don't have a form like that for Tennessee.
no.
Hmm.
You have
Really?
one in Kentucky.
We do.
No, no. It's the same contingencies. Now, what you can do is write a contingency in that it's contingent on the buyer actually seeing the property in person, and then give a date by which they have to do that. Most of the time, though, people will just use the inspection contingency. They'll come in, they'll come into town during the inspection period and see the property. But if they do not come to the house, and they come to the house maybe 2 days before closing, they can't just get out of the contract because they didn't like the house. There's not a form.
Not as far as getting out. I was talking about as far as holding the agent liable for anything.
No. There's not liability. The way our contracts are written, there's not liability because they're not the agent is not a party to the contract. So simply by the buyer signing the contract that they are purchasing the home, they are saying, yeah, we're basically taking the risk ourselves, whether or not we've seen it. And there's nothing even mentioned about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's gonna.
It would be a nice extra protection, but
Yeah.
I don't think that there's really legally anything that they could do if they are the ones that signed the contract and they didn't see it. That's up to them.
So I was trying to. I get that. I like to have it just as a little.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's kind of the same thing as having the COVID form. It's like, how are we responsible, for somebody's health if they go into a home and get sick? And first of all, how do you prove where you got it? I mean, it'd be pretty difficult to do that.
Right.
But, just having that form does kind of give you an extra shield, I guess, of protection.
I was actually going to pull up our form. I don't know if it's kind of to see the exact wording on it.
Mm-hmm.
But,
anybody else have questions? We can even go back and discuss anything from the multiple offer class, or if you weren't able to be in that class, if you have specific questions about the whole process of multiple offers, I'm happy to help with that.
they're very quiet today.
They're very quiet today. Okay. Well, I am going to, we'll stop the recording and discuss some office things. So thanks for being with us today. And next class is Thursday. Jeff Brewer, our own Jeff Brewer, owner of United Real Estate Music City, in hat and facial hair regale, will be teaching us how to work our database for referrals. So you certainly won't want to miss that.